Yeah, Marin again here, contributor to the Lido DAO, master of protocol relations in a DeFi for a while, so to speak. Second introduction from today, but here are the rock stars and the people we want to hear talking, so I'll give them the mic. Someone checked it, community checked, audited, all security parts satisfied. Do we see a future like that?
Just would be kind of the best example. I would say that a user can just open Web3 wallet. It doesn't matter if it's 1inch or something else, MetaMask, Trust Wallet, and user get access to it and get also proper explanation about the risks. It's also very important. Yeah, that not just that the people stake somewhere or like lock tokens, protocol tokens, or ETH or Bitcoin somewhere, and don't really understand what's actually happening. It's high risk also to, in terms of regulatory also a point of view, it could cause some potential cases. Yeah, but theoretically yes. So it's a good user experience, I would say, if someone can just easily from the Web3 wallet get access to all the different solutions, different products to participate in.
Thank you. It was a great intro for each individual. Now we're moving more towards group questions. So technology is at the early stage. We established it in a previous panel. We all are aware that it's a good testing ground, and our tradition is to test in production, obviously. But so do we see implementation in future of slashing AVSs as something that might break the rapid scalability, or we see it as something that is normal and natural flow of things? Because obviously slashing means higher security because everything needs to be more strict.
It should be strict from our point of view. So otherwise you can play around with that and cheat, you know. But of course, then you have the problem that adoption maybe can take longer, yeah, and yeah.
Yeah, I think we should separate like in restaking. I think there's something like we're most now focused on network security, so things like single finality or things like espresso systems or like Lagrange. They're all shared sequencing is all network security. But I think we will see in the future, we will see also a lot of other use cases that might also involve capital formation, risk underwriting, and other AVS use cases that we don't really see yet. And I think that's also what you are alluding to with like restaking, for example, tokens from bigger applications like maybe Frax or Curve or other assets that want to decentralize part of their DeFi stack while restaking, or Trocera, which I just had a talk with. It's just like they want to do threat prevention, but maybe then if you can restake to a protocol and then the protocol gets hacked, the users they can see if something goes wrong. There's a certain amount of capital that will be redistributed to users if there's a hack, for example. So I think there's a lot of different use cases that can fall underneath that. And I do think for network security, we should be very careful for slashing. But for other use cases, the slashing might be more of a feature than a bug.
Yeah, I actually think I might have a little bit of a contrarian opinion here. I think that slashing is not nice, right? And it's not easy to communicate to end users, and it's not easy to scale with slashing because that possibility is enormously like detrimental in the sort of the consumer's mind, right? Like, your friend Bob screws up and you lose your house. That's unacceptable as a product, and that's an enormous barrier to getting to market. So I do think that there will probably be services like underwriting, but maybe, and I don't have an answer for this, so maybe I'm just like talking out of my head, but I think that there's probably a world in which we find systems that are similar in their security without actually the full slashing. Because users just aren't going to sign up to systems where they have a chance of like loss at the hands of someone that they don't know. Yeah, I understand that this is how we're supposed to do it, but I think that that's an enormous barrier to consumer adoption.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think for the slashing, definitely some of the protocols lead slashing many more than the other protocols. So first of all, I think slashing is one of the most important, it's a critical feature of iDNAir. So in my mind, there are three features iDNAir should push critically. One is a fee protocol, the reward, users can get. The second is slashing, and the third is attributable security. So in terms of slashing, I think, for example, in our use cases for OpenLayer, we lead that pretty much because what we do is using the restate assets, we can assume the data we get is correct first, and then we run the verification afterwards, so that if the node is detected to be malicious, we can slash part of the restate assets. And also, from my understanding, some of the other AVS use it in a similar way. For example, we see the ZT processor, we see the FHE processor. Basically, both of them use restate assets, so they can do optimistically. They can assume correctly first, and then run the cryptographic verification, which usually needs to take a few seconds. So that's one thing. The other thing I think is, so even for slashing, we see there are two types of slashing. One is objectively attributable fault, and the other is intersubjectively attributable fault. For example, what we use is objectively attributable fault, which means as long as you act honestly, then there's no risk you can be slashed. But there is another type of slashing which could be harder to communicate to the users, which is even though you behave in an honest way, it's still a chance you can be slashed because of the difference in the social consensus. One example here could be the L job of the layer 0. I see there's a vote, there is a prediction market vote, which is whether or not you think layer 0 will have an L job. But in reality, what we know is there is an L job, but you need to donate some money to Arbitrum to some other chains first to claim that. Then we see there's a social inconsensus, which is some people consider it as an L job, but the other people think it's not an L job because you need to donate first. And then there's a debate in the community. And what I see is for iDNAir use cases, they will solve this in the new iDNAir token, which is an intersubjectively attributable fault. But I can see this can bring more confusion, and it's harder to communicate to the restaters.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of my point right there, where you could have a consumer that says, no, clearly it's not an airdrop, I had to pay for it, and yet they're slashed because they're not in the majority. That's really hard to explain to users, that they lost their money because the majority decided to take it. That's hard.
Given everything that's been stated here, is it too early to kick off the mass scaling? Does it need to be gradual, or you believe it's free-for-all, markets should decide?
Free for all.
Yeah, I think that's why we're here, right? Free markets.
I think for mass adoption, you need something, like I was saying, like, like a universal standard where you don't have to patch it up every time there's an upgrade with some, DeFi protocol or your smart contract upgrades. It has to be, consistent to be used. So for example, like a liquid ETH or something gets through regulation gets integrated with like institutions. If they issue another ticker symbol, then that has to go through the same thing again. And with like DeFi integrations as well, like I think the way we are working in this space right now is not really towards mass adoption. Like the way we build our product is just, oh, here's like a patch for the previous problem or something. So I think we really need to think about like how we structure the product when you're building out the product, whether it's for different scenarios, different case utilities, different long-term solutions, something that can withstand different upgrades throughout like time, and also for example, our Stone token, it can be integrated in like payment scenarios. It can be integrated in DeFi scenarios, and yeah, I think that's something that's really important. Also, having like a truly liquid asset, whereas like a lot of the LRT assets in the space are like still locked up, and you can't really like withdraw your ETH. There's like DPEG when there's like a 5% spread when you like swap it on different DeFi pools and stuff. So I think that needs to all come together before it reaches mass adoption.
I think it's also worthwhile asking ourselves if restaking is something that should be mass adoption, right? When I hear mass adoption, I hear like my grandmother using it, and just her holding LRTs and like staking with interest subject. Maybe it just doesn't vibe together, right? Maybe it looks more like in the future you have a pension fund, and under the hood there's thousands of analysts who are really smart who are doing this, and of course they take a substantial cut of the rewards, but at the end of the day, maybe that's the cost of you being able to like use this product without being a rocket scientist, essentially.
But doing it now, would it put strain on the technology itself? Like in terms of when you think of hyperscaling, yes, it means onboarding tons of users, but it also means a lot of infrastructure gets attached to it, right? Which creates additional strain to the code, which never was used in that direction. So that's why I was asking, slowly or fast?
I mean, I would prefer fast.
I think it's all about extracting away the complexities, making it very easy for the user, but giving them a solution to always dig deep and find out if they want to, right? So we need to write very good risk reports or very nice disclaimers, have a very easy to use interface, but then if they want to, they can dig down as deep as they want to and actually figure out all the things if they want to go that deep, right? If you use banking products today, you can't. You can't go into weird perspectives or something, but then you will never find, it's all hidden. And in crypto, we should build all in the open. But I think, I hope it's going to be fast adoption, and I think it depends on how much more shenanigans is the traditional finance industry is going to do. The more they do that, the better the adoption will be for us. So,
yeah, I would also say fast. Yeah, I would say from the perspective of the IDENIR as a shared trust marketplace, because right now we see there's so many restakers. We see more than 4 million ETH on the platform. But on the demand side, I would say we only see like a few AVS. Yeah, and that's the reason we see IDENIR is also scaling. They are doing the hackathon, they are hiring the top large people and engineers to basically scale the team, onboard more AVS. Yeah, actually, I want to see more AVS in the space because right now, there is a strong imbalance between the supply side and the demand side. Yeah, that's just something I want to add on here.
Yeah, I think it's worth thinking about mass adoption from the two sides, right? From the capital providing side and the services that need that capital for security. And maybe the restaking, the mass adoption actually has to happen and people needing this technology first for the other part.
Yeah, I would like to add, you cannot force adoption. You can only create an environment where you cover demand and you generate value. As soon as you generate value, adoption comes automatically because there's a value what someone can arbitrage or take, yeah, and it's the same happened with us. We just have seen this demand for something. We generated value by providing really nice tool what solved problem and pain and saved time and money for people, and adoption came by themselves in terms of like user, yeah, like user adoption.
We truly pack a lot of expertise and building experience in the lineup. So I'm curious to ask, Eigen launched first and became synonym for restaking. Are we looking at winner takes it all, first mover advantage, given there are hundreds of AVSs being built already to be on top of EigenLayer, or we see competition coming up, which is often a good driver for innovation in our space, right? But then there are multiple directions. There are aggregation layers, there are specializations. So where do we see this moving forward? And are we actually seeing sort of a winner-takes-all environment?
I guess competition is great in terms of like for the user at all. If you are alone, you know, and you're building like one thing and only you are on the market, then you became lazy, and the user actually don't benefit from innovations on competition. So it's very important to have competitors, and I think like it's like always everywhere there are people who compete. It's sometimes okay to be number 2. So I say always to my team, guys, I'm okay to be number 2 after Uniswap. I'm fine. They are in the front. They deal right now with SEC, and we are happy that we have time to prepare ourselves for some other topics. I'm okay to be number 2, and the same like also here. You have a lot of competitors who are building in the same space, and you should think about that other people, like other companies, also onboarding other people. Yeah, so they actually do your job as well. It's very important. So we are not active. We are not in US, for example. Uniswap is in the US, and that's great for us because they onboard people in US. And as soon as the regulatory landscape is clear, then potentially we can also operate with a license in US one day. Yeah?
You know, we talk with a lot of different protocols who are interested in using their governance token in restaking. And the other day, one of them said something really interesting that has stuck with me for the past few days. They said, Dennison, we want to use our token to restake on our own services that we build, and for our ecosystem to be able to build services and be aligned with us by letting the token be restaked there. But do we have to pick a restaker first? Meaning they were thinking, do we have to pick Karak? Do we have to pick EigenLayer? Do we have to pick Symbiotic? Can't you just make that piece uniform? And that really opened in my mind the idea of like, maybe we're going to get to like commodification of restaking faster than I would have expected. I certainly got into restaking thinking this is definitely winner take all. But the fact that projects don't want to commit to a restaking framework because they're not sure. They have the same question, is it winner take all? Because if it isn't, they feel like maybe they're going to get stuck on an island where they built out something. Now ideally that should make it winner take all, but there's this strange social dynamic happening where they're just insecure about like what tech solution they should be choosing. So going forward, does it remain winner take all? I'm not sure. Maybe it actually becomes really hyper-specialized with a lot of aggregation layers on top of it. I think, you know, in the panel previously, there was a question around like how much security is enough security, right? There may be products that say, hey, we're just a lot cheaper because it's a lot less economic security, but more than you need.
Yeah, I think now EigenLayer is definitely front-running it because they're building this for many years. And there's like upcoming competitors like, oh, that's interesting. So there's a lot of ground they still need to cover, and there's a lot of ground that EigenLayer itself still needs to cover. But what's interesting, if you look into architectural designs of these systems, everybody has like really wild new ideas. So it's really, will be really cool to see it all be playing out. But I would say it's still, for a lot of the other competitors, still quite early. So I'm very curious to see what they will actually deploy, what kind of code they will deploy. And that is still kind of unsure. So if you say like Karak, for example, well, I would like to see what they have. I don't know. They don't publish their code. So where Symbiotic does have a really good architecture and they're working very hard. So really looking forward to their release and see what they have built. And EigenLayer, we can see what is being built. But in general, I would say it's still quite early. But I do think what I already see, I think there's a lot of different ways to do it, right? So where I think EigenLayer is specializing in network security, is really specializing in certain vertical. And where I see Symbiotic, I see Symbiotic moving more into this kind of custom slashing, like just whatever you want to build, not, you know, they do a hands-off approach, I think. It's more open, and it's all open, but it's like, I see a lot of different architectures emerging, and I think they will all compete, and the faster and the more they compete, the better products we can build on, I would say.
So we are scaling for the users, obviously. Everything what we do is for the users. Do we see enhancement of the scaling itself in restaking by migration of the users from other ecosystems, other L2s, for example, for specific use cases of L2s, or other consumers of specific services, or do we see onboarding of brand new users as a key thing to happen?
I would like to see onboarding of new users. Something that I'm a little bit worried about in the restaking ecosystem is that it's fighting over one pie, right? The opportunity really is just to massively grow, right? Like I had a tweet a couple weeks ago about how you could maybe use restaking for just like protecting yourselves against like judicial jurisdictions. Just like scale the security available on chain, off chain. Maybe there's a world in which we don't have to bother really fighting over just like how much ETH there is, but really just apply restaking kind of everything out there in the world, which would be really exciting. Because in a way, it's kind of like an insurance policy. And insurance doesn't really have any limit to how much you can scale it and the applications that you can put it towards.
Yeah, I think already, if you do so, you can restake any asset. You can restake LP to pools. You can restake stable coins. You can restake ETH. You can restake validators. Yeah, you can restake anything, actually. Yeah.
That's exciting for me.
Yeah, I think it's important to onboard new users and also abstracting all that complexity away from them as well. Maybe, as you mentioned, your grandma restaking. I think there is a way to create like a super like abstracted process for them to be able to restake. It could be like through like institutions or regulatory parties like custodial solutions, and it could be like, okay, you want an option of like staked ETH on top of like Hashkey Cloud like deck or something. So it could be like through these ways that we onboard like new adoption, like new use, like mass adoption, and this way we're not just fighting over the same pie.
Yeah, I think another good reason to focus more on the new apps is what I understand is what Irenair provides is a quick way to bootstrap your trust network, which means this could be very valuable for some new applications, for some smaller startups to quickly bootstrap. They don't need to find operators, they don't need to do the BD part by themselves one by one, but instead, they can quickly follow the developer integration and onboard on Irenair. But on the other side, let's say if there's a more mature project, they have, for example, hundreds of millions of TVL. What they might more is, like, for example, they might want more options for other assets besides listed ETH. And also, they want many more customization besides some default options to provide. So, and also, they have more resource to talk to each of the like top operator in the space to onboard them. Yeah, so I think from this perspective, I also agree like new applications could have more potential space.
So short one, last one, because we're a bit over time, but a bit of a cheeky question, but it's directed to builders, so I'm generally curious where it takes us. What after the point mania?
I think we go back to DeFi yield farming.
Yeah, we just talked about it. I miss DeFi summer. The first DeFi summer was the innovation was so much faster than now. I think sometimes I feel things are getting a little bit stagnated because of points. Like people are taking less risks and cutting some corners. We did develop a fully deterministic point system, so we did kind of a little bit on maybe a bit over the top, but like we were like, yeah, but let's try to do it a bit better. I think the points matter will stay because I do see it. It's more like an alignment system. The reason why I think projects give out points or why YieldNest gives out points is to kind of find alignment with communities and see where do we want to distribute our governance power to, and how do we kind of build a protocol or a community with people that are actually aligned with a certain vision and direction of this protocol, and at what point can we go hands off and be like, all right, so these people that have now power in this system can then govern the system, and that's I think why the points narrative took off. But I do think it got a little bit abused. But I think we're just gonna revert back to more real stuff like soon when we get more real AVS use cases, or when we get more real restake use cases. So I think The points meta is a thing that kind of overblown, but it goes back to the mean, reverts back to its mean, and then eventually it will be used for what it's used for, and it's just community alignment. I think that's where it's going to go, and then eventually real products will come out of it.
Yeah, I think we did the biggest points program with Manta from Stone, and I think it's actually the whole points thing is setting us back from the DeFi innovative space, because it's actually super centralized, and you're manipulating how yield is distributed before it actually happens. And there's a lot of people get disappointed nowadays with the point system, right? Your funds are getting locked up. If you withdraw, you don't get the points. And it's actually, I think, and the way it's calculated, and the way it's not on chain. It's super centralized. And also, you talk to whales, and then you say, okay, I'm gonna give you a boost, and then you're essentially manipulating the market, and it's steering us away from decentralized DeFi and all that. So I think it's actually setting us back.
I think points are here to stay. Your local coffee shop does points. Your local restaurant does points. Your airline does points. Your hotels does points. Car rental does points. Everything, practically everything in your life has points if you looked around and you cared for those points. I think the point about it being, the point about that being centralized is also it sort of leaves maximum optionality open to the teams who are doing it sometimes as regulatory arbitrage, sometimes as consumer engagement, sometimes as pure marketing, and they kind of need to leave their options open a little bit early on. I do expect there to be a lot more disappointment with points ahead. But if you think about it, in the real world, most points that you collect are disappointments anyway. So I think that people should just get used to points being disappointing. That's what it is. But there are going to be some folks out there who, get the 10 cappuccinos to get one free and the 10 pizzas to get one free. But the rest of them, they'll see it and they'll clip the card now and then. But, they may come back from a marketing point of view, but I would say just expect to be disappointed, but don't think they're going anywhere.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with this. Yeah, actually, I think the problem of this is not because of points. It's because of the value of the token when points is converted to the token. For example, we see, let's say, an easy example, the airdrop of the Blast. Why people don't like points is not because of its centralization. Every airdrop is centralization. Even before points, we see the airdrop. It's more centralization, and also it's non-transparent. For points, I think it's a little more transparent than the traditional airdrop mechanism. But why people don't like Blast points is because when the points convert to the token, the value or the revenue the users get is not as expected as they have before. For example, if we see right now we see a strong market, or we see there are many new exciting applications in the space, we see more money inflow to the market, then everyone is happy. Centralization is not a problem anymore. So I would say it's centralization is just attitudes, but the deep reason or deep factor is because of the missing of the new exciting innovations in the space, which leads to a not bullish market right now. Yeah.
Amadeo, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're actually, as you described, you're building an AVS already. Yeah. So essentially, by design, it implies you're thinking long-term. Aligning with everyone is here to stay is going to be for something specific, maybe a cap, maybe a boost, with no promises. But does it mean that we are venturing into a point system which is permissionless? Right? Can it help Lido, and can it help 1inch, which we were so before the times of points? So it was very hard to follow with assumptions, as you all described. Everyone presumes some value added to it, but it doesn't need to be specific monetary value. So can it help in these use cases?
Yeah, so for Hackathon, we built Point Guard because we actually analyzed a lot of the point systems and actually found out oh my god, all of them are diluting. It's not really fair for the early users. So we built Point Guard, so then the point system itself doesn't have a database. So, but fully deterministic, I mean that it's kind of like on-chain actions, and if the database goes away, you can always replay that on-chain. And then there is an AVS that you can, if you can prove that we didn't give the right amount of points, we will get slashed, right? So we kind of were innovating in a kind of fun way how to kind of, at one hand, kind of showcase what an AVS is, what restaking is, and then they might make more sense. And I think that's important. And then points are here to stay. The points in the current form, I don't think they will stay, actually. In the current form as like, oh, it's just this intransparent thing, and yeah, you might get something. I think points will stay, but there will be a clear outcome of what users should get for certain actions that they did. And right now, this is not the case. People were so happy that Layer 0 gave a output of an Excel sheet of, wow, I have so many airdrops, and I was like, wow, well, this should be way more transparent. If we go back to our crypto native values of why this industry actually grew, if we go back to that, then points might make sense. But we do need to implement them in a better way, I would say. Yeah.
Can I just ask one last thing here, though? Isn't there a kind of problem where you could have a transparent point system, but then you go and you do the airdrop and, oh, sorry, you're from a country that you can't claim? Right, that's kind of a weird world, because you do want to incentivize people around the world, but then you're like, but actually you can't.
Well, that goes against crypto native values. So crypto native values are, it shouldn't matter where you're from. It's just like we're building cryptographic systems that no matter what happens, like, you know, that's the whole thing, right? So that we should go back to crypto native values and should not lose that. Yeah.
Maybe that's the problem then.
Thank you, everyone.